Hello everyone, it is Overpowered and welcome back to another episode of Clash Royale. And as we already know, the Royal Giant had one of the biggest buffs in Clash Royale history, with his range being increased by 1. This change to the Royal Giant and Clash Royale was so significant to the game, to the point where the Royal Giant went from being one of the most underplayed cards inside of the game to one of the most played cards into the game right now. With his ability to snipe most defensive towers, the Royal Giant right now is considered to be overpowered by a lot of players in the Clash Royale community, and I personally think that because of this huge change that the Royal Giant got, it will most definitely be nerfed in the next Clash Royale update. So I thought it would be interesting to take a look at how we can actually nerf the Royal Giant to the point where it will still maintain its usability, but not be too nerfed to the point where he isn't useful in a lot of decks anymore, such like, for example, the X-Bow is, like, because you never see the X-Bow anymore. So I basically compiled a list of 5 ways on how we can actually nerf the Royal Giant. Before we continue, please take into consideration that this list is purely based off my opinion, but do take this in mind. My mindset behind these nerfs that I'm making in this list are based on the fact that there's something that I feel a lot of players inside of the game right now are forgetting. The Royal Giant is only a common card, and right now it is stronger than most rares, epics, and even some legendaries inside of the game. Pretty much just like how a miner is a little bit weaker than the knight, it still moves faster and has the unique ability that it can place anywhere on the field. So I feel that on itself makes a huge difference, and because of that, the miner, it makes a lot of sense that it's considered to be a legendary. However, the Royal Giant is only a common card, but is stronger than most epics, for instance. So yes, that being said, let's just jump straight into the list. I feel that one of the most obvious nerfs would be that the damage would be decreased for the Royal Giant. With the damage decrease on the Royal Giant, it will basically revert back to the time where the Royal Giant just got released. In the very first card balancing update before his range got increased, the damage of the Royal Giant was already increased by a 20% in order to make him more appealing. And I believe that if you actually take back that 20% damage and would give him that 20% damage decrease, it would first of all allow for people to panic less whenever they see the Royal Giant on the field, but I still think it would be of great value for the elixir you will pay. The second most obvious nerf to make onto the Royal Giant would be to decrease the health he currently has. I actually compared some numbers together, and what I found out was really interesting. So currently the Royal Giant almost has the same amount of health as a Valkyrie and a Knight combined together, and both of those units are considered to be medium tankish kind of units. Now in general, I noticed that the average Royal Giant that is placed inside of the game will get about 3 or 4 hits in on a building at any given time. Now take into consideration, if you imagine that that building would be the tower, because if it actually locks onto the tower on itself, you will need a zap in order to redirect him. But let's say if he's gonna be focusing onto the tower alone, if you get 4 hits in with the Royal Giant onto that tower, the health of the tower will be gone for 1/3 entirely. And that is if you're playing an even matchup. So I think 1/3 of a tower gone by playing a Royal Giant is actually quite major. So I feel that if you decrease the amount of health, you will limit the potential to solely rely onto the Royal Giant, and if you decrease the health by about 10 to 20%, you will already take away one of those 4 or 3 hits on average, making him less devastating of a force, but yet a very playable card. Alright, so this next nerf might be a little bit controversial, but this is just an idea and I'm just throwing it out there. This is just opinionated. The Royal Giant is already relatively expensive with 6 elixir, right? But I feel you're getting the most out of it with 6 elixir. It is by far, I feel, the best 6 elixir card. So another nerf you can apply to the Royal Giant would be to increase the amount of elixir it would cost to deploy him to 7 without actually nerfing anything else at the side. And the reason why I'm saying this is because I see cards like the P.E.K.K.A. or the Golem, which are more expensive right now than the Royal Giant, but they're being countered more easily than the Royal Giant. Now I know that this in particular might sound really strange when I say this, because the Royal Giant obviously has less health than the 2 of them, but to put it into perspective, because the Royal Giant is a ranged unit, he often is already able to get a couple of hits in while the P.E.K.K.A. and the Golem don't, and that's why I simply feel that another way to actually nerf the Royal Giant would be to increase the amount of elixir it would cost to deploy him. I think a really interesting way of nerfing the Royal Giant but to still keep it an awesome card is to decrease the amount of damage it is right now doing against Crown Towers. I think that in general right now the Royal Giant is an excellent card against spawner decks, and I feel that a lot of people use the Royal Giant for this purpose alone already. So I feel if we keep this functionality, however, by making him weaker to the Crown Tower but still being able to do the regular damage against other buildings, I think it would still be considered a very awesome card. And I think that about 25 to 40% damage decrease onto Crown Towers would be the sweet spot for the Royal Giant, and I can pretty much assure you that it still will be a very much popular card from the way it is right now. So the final nerf I had in mind for the Royal Giant is to decrease the attack speed, and here's why. If you actually take a look at the brother, the Giant, you will see that the Royal Giant has the exact same attack speed as the Giant. And what I'm going to say right now may sound a little bit strange, but hear me out on this one. So this is just based on physics, right? So the regular Giant uses his fist to attack, while the Royal Giant is loading up this massive cannon and then shoots up. And they both have the same attack speed, which doesn't make a lot of sense if you take that into consideration. I think it's honestly a bit silly, and because of that alone already, I feel that the Royal Giant should be a little bit slower in attacking from his brother the Giant. The P.E.K.K.A. on itself already is a little bit slower than the Giant, so why not just make the Royal Giant the exact same attack speed as the P.E.K.K.A. Is literally only a 0.3 second difference, but I feel it makes sense if you take this into consideration. Anyway, these are my 5 things that we can nerf onto the Royal Giant. You know, we've seen a lot of videos out there supporting the Royal Giant. I kind of want to throw indirectly a little bit of hate or maybe some ideas, because I honestly kind of feel that the Royal Giant, it can be countered, but I still feel it is relatively overpowered. In general, I just hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Take it with a grain of salt. It's not meant to be too serious, but I hope that Supercell will at least take these nerfs into consideration. I also want to let you guys know that I opened up a Patreon page. If you really enjoy my content in general and you want to support what I'm doing, please take a look. It will be linked in the video description down below. And as always, make sure that if you guys like this video to boom, give it a thumbs up. That being said, this has been Reversal for Clash Royale. I'm gonna be signing off. I'll see you guys back again very soon with another top 5.